Hey kids, it's Mr. Fly here, hope you're well. And welcome back to the channel for another bike review. Now this is a bit of an unusual bike review because this is a bike actually that for some reason I wasn't particularly interested in reviewing. Now it's odd because this is a Royal Enfield. I'm on the Super Meteor 650, which is a big cruiser bike. And I say it's odd because I am a fan of the Royal Enfield marque. I particularly like the Hunter, which I recently reviewed, the 350. I love the classic 350. I think that's a brilliant bike. And of course, I love the Interceptor. I own one. So by all accounts, I am an Enfield fanboy. So what is it about this bike, their new cruiser machine, that I don't like? Well, stick around and stay tuned, and I'll tell you. Alrighty, so welcome back to the channel, folks. And yeah, so what is it about the Super Meteor that didn't make me very excited? Well, basically, I don't really regard myself as a cruiser man. There have been one or two cruisers that I like, notably things like the Harley-Davidson Fat Boy. What an absolutely incredible machine. And more recently, the other Harley-Davidson that I rode, I temporarily can't remember what it's called. But anyway, I'll stick the name on the screen. But those I really enjoyed, and of course I love the Triumph Speedmaster as well. That is one of my favourite bikes actually. But generally speaking, all that aside, I'm not a big cruiser fan. And when I first saw the pictures of this bike, well, it just didn't appeal to me, because for me a cruiser is all about engineering excess, massive over powerful engines, bags of torque, incredible amounts of chrome, lots of bling, and usually a price tag to match. And it has to be said, this bike has none of those things. Before we get into more detail, let me show you what this one looks like. Okay, so here she is, the Super Meteor 650 from Royal Enfield. I suppose you'd call it kind of a classic cruiser look. You're kind of either into these sort of bikes or you're not. As I say, I'm not really. Let me show you around this one though, nonetheless, some of the detail here. There are some good points about here, I must say. So first off, look, we've got LED lights on the Super Meteor, something that I don't think Royal Enfield have done before, or I haven't noticed it before, so that's nice. Another big change, it's got upside down forks on here, and these are from Showa, so you know, the cycle parts are quite good quality on here. What else can I say? I said it hasn't got much chrome to polish. Well, you have got those chrome downpipes, which look quite good at the front there where they come out the engine. Not so sure about the actual pipes themselves. They're not quite pea shooter, are they? But they sound good, but I just don't know if I quite like the look of those. The bits that I don't like about the bike, I do quite like the feet forward, by the way, on this, because although I don't like feet forward, generally speaking, these aren't that far forward, as you would have seen. But yeah, something that maybe I'm not so sure about is the frame on here. I think it is a different, well, it is a different frame to the one on the Interceptor. But some of the welds don't look that great. So there's one here that looks a little bit, you know, bird pooey. Just some little bits of fit and finish on it aren't quite to my taste. There's quite a lot of you know, pipes and wiring and things like that that's exposed. It'd be nice if it was more neatly hidden away, but then again, you've got to consider this is a budget offering, so I'm not complaining too much on that. But it's got all the elements of a cruiser. It's got proper mud guards. I know lots of people get very upset when bikes don't have decent mud guards, but you can't complain on the mud guards on this one. Old school rear light, I suppose, is in keeping with the whole vibe of the thing. And I do actually quite like the fuel tank on this. I'm not sure this colour does it the most favours. It does come in a big range of colours. That's one great thing about Royal Enfield. They do all sorts of colour schemes, and I think this probably looks best in the black personally. But yeah, there we go. So that's what she looks like. Let's jump back on her and see how she goes. Alrighty, so welcome back. So much for what she looks like. How about the ride itself? Am I being a little bit hasty discounting this bike? Because my initial thoughts are actually, you know what, I might be. Because even though this is the first ride I've had on the bike, this is very much a first impressions review. Already, I'm impressed by the ride on this. Of course, I'm very used to the ride on the Interceptor. I've had mine since 2019, so I know how that feels. And this is basically the same engine. Well, it is exactly the same engine on this bike, although it has got a slightly different ECU tune. Thank you, sir, the white van, very kind. So it's got a bit more of a lazy tune in line with its cruiser vibe, and also it's got a different airbox and different exhaust, so it sounds a little bit different to the Interceptor. And it's got, you know, a fair amount to go for a 650 as well. We'll go through the specs shortly. But the first thing I notice when I jump on any bike for the first time is how does it feel? What's the comfort like? Well, this is very comfortable. It is a feet forward cruiser, as hopefully you can see from the 360 camera. My feet are, you know, not underneath my knees, they are out front, but they're not out front in an extreme way like they would be, for example, on the Harley Davidson Fat Boy. They're not that much more out front than, say, on a Bonneville T120. So actually the feet forwardness on this doesn't feel too bad. The handlebars are nice and wide and set a reasonable degree back, so for me with my dodgy arthritic shoulders it actually feels a comfortable place to be. And the seat itself, lovely and padded, I have to say. And although it's, you know, it is a cruiser seat, so it cups your buttocks and keeps you put in the same place, so you can't move around and stretch your legs particularly, it does feel like a comfortable seat. So no complaints, at least on a short first ride, with regards to the comfort of the thing. It's really nice. With regards of, oh, one thing I would say about the comfort, actually, this fuel tank seems really, really wide, so my legs are kind of actually quite comfortably tucked at the sides of it and touching the tank. If you're a slightly bigger person than me, I'm 5'8", with apparently unusually long legs, people tell me. But I find it quite comfortable. But if you were bigger than me, you might find that your legs kind of got in the way of the tank a bit, or that you'd have to splay your legs out a long way, because it does feel very wide between your legs. I don't dislike that, actually. It feels alright to me. Comfort wise, no problems with this. If you want a bit of wind protection, by the way, you can get a touring option that comes with a screen and panniers for a bit extra money. I prefer the naked look of the standard bike. In terms of what you're looking at, well, that's where it falls down a little bit, I think, because I don't much like this display here. They've got a single clock, at least it's a clock and not a TFT. But it just looks a bit Mickey Mouse to me. It's not a classic looking dial. Okay, it's not a really expensive bike, but that doesn't look as nice as what you'd find on, say, a Triumph or on a Harley Davidson. And that is married next to it with the Royal Enfield Tripper device, which is like a navigation device. It's not a fully featured sat-nav. It's a bit like the Beeline sat-nav. It's a kind of get you there device. You hook it up to an app and it links up to Google, actually. In fact, I think Royal Enfield developed this with Google, and it gives you turn-by-turn directions. I've not got it linked up to my phone at the moment, mainly because I haven't worked out how you do that. I'm sure it's not difficult. It's probably just me being lazy, but it's great that it's on there. So that's, you know, it's a good thing that the Tripper's there. But yeah, the instrumentation on it, to my, it doesn't look great. What you're looking at doesn't look great. Switch gear is good though, slightly different to what I've got on my older Interceptor. I think this is now pretty standard across the range, this type of rotary switch gear on Royal Enfields. It's certainly similar to what's on the classic 350, and I like it very much. It's positive to feel, it's easy to use. It is a very simple motorcycle, so the controls reflect that. They're very simple, and that's fine with me. Mirrors on it are quite stalky. I'm not a massive fan of the looks, but they work absolutely fine, and they're not vibrating away. I can see behind me fine. So yeah, all good in that respect. Alright, let's take the opportunity to talk you through the spec on the machine. Okay, let's look at some of those all-important numbers then, starting with this engine, which is very familiar to me because this is basically the same engine as the one you find in the Royal Enfield Interceptor. So it's the same 648cc parallel twin. It's got a slightly different mapping and a different airbox, but otherwise it's the same, putting out 47 PS at 7,250 RPM and 52.3 Newton meters of torque. Let's look at the brakes. At the front here, you've only got this single disc on here. This is a 320mm disc with a 2-pot caliper. At the back here, you've got a fairly large 300mm disc with a twin-pot caliper by Bray as well, which is the sort of budget brand of Brembo. Suspension-wise, at the front here, you've got 43mm upside-down forks from Showa, which is unusual for Royal Enfield, both to have Showa forks and to have them upside down. And at the back end, you've got these twin shocks with 101mm of travel. Lovely comfortable seat on this, and that seat height is just 740mm, so all but the shortest people will get their feet flat on the floor on this one. Cruisers are usually pretty heavy. This is no exception. This is 241 kilograms curb weight, but actually that's relatively light as cruisers go, but significantly more heavier than the Interceptor. For some reason I do like the fuel tank on here, and this one holds 15.7 litres of fuel. Electronics wise, not much to write home about. You have got dual channel ABS, you've got these LED lights all round, and of course you've got the Royal Enfield trip and navigation device. Price wise, the Super Meteor comes in at £7,299, which I think is pretty good value. And for comparison purposes, the Interceptor, the sort of non-cruiser version if you like, is £6,599, so that's kind of how the two compare. Also comes with a 3-year warranty, which I think is excellent. Okay, welcome back aboard. What's she like handling wise then? This is my favourite little bit of handling road. It's just a short blast, but it's quite bumpy and it's quite twisty with some undulations, so it's quite a nice standard road to test handling on. And do you know what? For a cruiser, this handles really well actually. Often with cruisers I say that you have to work at them, you have to muscle them around the corners, but this one isn't hideously raked out. Like for example the Harley Davidson Breakout, which is the bike I couldn't remember the name of earlier. That's got a raked out front end, almost like a chopper. This one is raked out but nowhere near that much, so you don't have to really work hard to go around corners. It handles absolutely fine turning wise, and the suspension is really quite nice and plush on here. As you just saw, this has got a shower suspension, which is the first for Royal Enfield and a step up from the stuff that's on the Interceptor. And certainly on this first ride evidence, it seems to work really nicely. It's a pretty plush ride. So I'll tell you what, at the start of the review I said that to me a cruiser is all about, you know, excess, big engines, lots of chrome, all that stuff, lots of power, and this hasn't got that. But I'll tell you what it has got instead is an engine that is perfectly eager. It feels great, this engine, but when you wind her up, there's plenty enough power there. More than those specification figures would have you believe, and it handles really nicely. Not often am I surprised by bike. Often bikes are kind of as I would expect they're going to be. Now this bike I didn't expect to like, but actually from a riding perspective I do like it. Even the feet forward riding position isn't that terrible on here. Would I buy one though? I suppose that's the acid test, and I have to say, in all honesty, no I wouldn't. I mean, it is great value for money at around about the 7k mark. That's a lot of bike for the money, and if you do like the cruiser look, then this has got to be towards the top of your list. I mean, the only other bike I guess that can compete with this is things like the Honda Rebel 500, which is actually a little bit cheaper I think in standard form, and of course you get the whole Honda reliability thing. I'm certainly not implying that Royal Enfields aren't reliable. My Interceptor has been wholly reliable, and I haven't heard any terrible stories of other bikes that aren't. So, but you know, Honda do have that legendary reliability, don't they? And their build quality is top notch on Hondas as well. The build quality on this I don't think is quite there with Honda build quality, but it ain't far off. It's not bad. But the reason why I wouldn't buy one is just because, well, I just don't really like the cruiser thing. Out of this and the Interceptor, I'd have the Interceptor, and the Interceptor is somewhat cheaper than this. But that is not to say it's a bad bike by any means. Cruisers might be your thing, in which case, well, I can highly recommend this because it handles well, it's really comfortable, it goes well, the engine sounds nice, the controls all work well. It's a simple no-nonsense bike. Just going to test the brakes. Nothing behind me. Front brake, I would say, is adequate. I mean, it's very predictable, it's not grabby or anything like that, but you do have to give it quite a squeeze, and I suppose that's because of that single front disc. Let me just get around this corner and I'll try the rear. Yeah, the rear's fine. Felt the ABS cutting quite quickly. Let's just try again. It's a little bit damp. Oh yeah, the back actually. I'm glad the ABS did cutting, because it actually started to slide a little bit there, which is a bit weird. But yeah, it's a bit damp out on the roads today. Well, it certainly was in that little section. This is the British summer for you folks. At least it's not raining. I suppose I should be thankful for that, but not exactly the sort of day you'd hope, but there we go. But yeah, brakes are nothing special, but the comfort is good and the engine is great. Certainly you can't argue with the value for money. So I've changed my mind. Although it's not my cup of tea, which is purely a personal thing from a styling point of view, it does ride very well, this bike. And if you do like this style of bike, I think you'd be quite impressed with this. It's really easy to ride. It'd actually make a great first bike, I think. because the engine size isn't too intimidating. It's got enough go to get you where you want to, overtake, ride on dual carriageways, that sort of thing. And also it's very easy to ride, it's just unintimidating. Whereas some cruisers can be intimidating, certainly the Fat Boy is, because of its massive weight. And indeed cost. You know, this being the £7,000 mark, it's that, you know, you don't have to be too precious about it, do you? It's not 27. Gearbox is really nice actually, snicks into gear a treat. And the clutch, which is a slip and assist clutch on here, really nice and light as well. So I find myself remaining a Royal Enfield fanboy. They've done very well with this one again. I'm really looking forward to see what else Royal Enfield come up with over the next few years, because well, haven't they come on in the last, I suppose about the last 6 or 7 years. I suppose it was probably about 7 years ago when I first rode my first Royal Enfield, which was a classic 500, and although I love the styling of it, it has to be said, it was a bit of a dog to ride. The gearbox was terrible, had a load of character, but yeah, it wasn't in the same league as these modern day Royal Enfields, which are just great bikes to ride, great value for money. And they're just in a different league to what they used to be, and this Super Meteor is no different in that respect. It's a good bike. So don't take my word for it, as ever. It's just my opinion. I'm not an expert. I have ridden a few bikes, but I don't claim to be an expert rider or anything else. Do have a go on the bike yourself if you fancy one, if you can get a test ride. But I think it's definitely worth shortlisting. I very much enjoyed riding it today. Alright, thanks very much for watching. If it's the first time you've been along to the channel, don't be a stranger. Hit that subscribe button. I look forward to speaking to you next time. Until then, this has been the Mr. Flyer. Cheerio.